Good evening, everyone. Maybe I'll give you a quick background about myself. I know that the title may be misleading. It sounds like a business title, but I'm an AppSec guy. So let's get started with that. You mentioned OWASP and the membership, and I think it's maybe kind of worth mentioning. I got exposed to OWASP at 2012, which is when I had my email address. And since then, I can't log in because of whatever strict policy we have. I've seen all of the contributions to the project. I had a secure test-driven development project back then. They didn't succeed. Most projects don't succeed, but eventually some of them, get to what they are. So thanks for, bringing everyone together. And AI SBS, I didn't know about that. So I already learned something new today. Okay, so a little bit about me, and that will kind of give you maybe a point of view of why I am talking about the things that I'm talking. But in essence, I started with like sysadmin stuff, basic stuff, then did some penetration testing. I have a few CVs on my name. Fun fact, I broke chip and pin, the EMV. And since then, somehow I got into management. I don't know how, and well, I'm here. So fortunately, I have very good friends that are developers. And every time that I spoke with them and said, hey, in security, you need to do A, B, and C. And the common answer that I've got from them is, we don't care. And so, when we, when I was in the previous company, I was in a company called Finastra. Most people don't know the company. It's the third largest fintech after Fiserv and FIS. And we had we were regulated. We had to build a good AppSec program, and we did. I wrote a few containers that were running on a daily basis, and went to all of our tools. Contrast, by the way, I was a customer as well. And really collected all of the findings and put them on a dashboard. And that was great because I had a single pane of glass, or single glass of pane, whatever it is. And eventually what I learned is that seeing all of those vulnerabilities and reporting them up through the chain, which back then it was the engineering leadership, product leadership, and general managers, it did make an impact. But the developers didn't like it. And because of that, we ended up, myself, the guy that was didn't care about security at all, one of my co-founders, and another one, we came up together and decided that we need to solve the conflict between developers and security. And that's our path in the last 4 years. So what I'm going to show you today, and what I'm going to discuss with you today, is not necessarily what Arnica does. As a matter of fact, I don't think they even posted a single screenshot from Arnica. Well, maybe one, but you won't recognize it. It's Arnica. But we'll talk through the different workflows that make a real impact on developers. The ones that make developers want to do security, as opposed to kind of being forced and bend their hands to do that. Okay, so maybe we'll start with the different points of view. And we are living in the same world in which we want to deliver software. Each one of us has a different role and a different perspective on how do we deliver software. And eventually there's what the developers ask, and there's what the other side interprets by that ask. And we'll talk a little bit about AI. I don't have the word AI in the slides purposely. That's the credit that we need here. So first of all, if you look at the developer side, all they care about, all the things that are measured on, is how fast can they deliver software. If there is a feature that is written, they need to deliver it by the time that they're committed to. And also, in many cases, in the kind of agile world, they also want to be able to iterate multiple times. And I know that not every company is Netflix that need to deploy 1,000 times a day, But even those companies that need to deploy maybe, I don't know, once every other week, or maybe even once every few weeks, they still need to iterate multiple times. But then when the developers say, I want to deliver fast, what security needs to understand out of this? Well, security understands, hey, you need to deliver fast. It means that you will bypass my controls. And maybe you won't bypass because I have the authority to block anyone from deploying code to production. If I do have the ability to block anyone from deploying to production, it creates friction. And then we're going back to why developers hate security. So it's not solving the problem. Now, let's spice it up a little bit. I saw an interview between Mark Zuckerberg and Satya Nadella, and they discussed about how much code is being generated by AI today. I think in Microsoft, there's roughly 30% of the new code is written by AI, with a projection to be roughly 95% of the new code to be written by AI. So the reason why I added this small diagram is that development velocity goes up significantly. We started adopting AI at Arnica by our own development team, and we actually use Cursor and GitHub Copilot in conjunction for different types of functionality. And what we've noticed is close to 4x the amount of pull requests that we have to review, because developers are no longer focused as much on writing the code. They're focused on reviewing the code. And security just add more friction, because now we have more findings or more pull requests, and just it's unmanageable. So as you think about the development velocity, that everything goes up, the security team's velocity is actually pretty stale. Developers get the productivity gains. Again, according to GitHub, roughly 55% productivity gain. But in security, we don't really get this. And we have a real problem. We can't hire more people. We need to find a way to make an impact with the tools that we have in hand. But let's flip that coin for a second. And let's talk about what security actually needs. Okay, let's say that we'll take out of the equation all of the regulatory requirements and so on, because it's very specific to verticals. But in high level, the things that we need in security is really get a full visibility of all of our risks and be able to prioritize those risks. The reason why you can see a funnel here, it's probably because most of the products that at least I've seen, they tell you this is the amount of findings. We then deduplicate it. Then we look for deprioritization, maybe reachability, maybe exploitability, and whether it has a fix. So I have 1 million findings, and now it got down to 10,000. Who will fix those 10,000 findings? No one, right? So yeah, we trimmed the number and did absolutely nothing about it. And aside from this, visibility and prioritization that is a common theme today around security, the security teams actually need to have the capability to have some muscles, to actually say, you know what, you cannot deploy to production if you have, let's say, the most common policy is 0 new high in critical severity vulnerabilities. That's the easiest policy to apply. You have the backlog, you'll tackle the backlog, but how do you actually, stop chasing your own tail? That's kind of the initial policy. But what do developers really understand from this? So the developers get the 10,000 findings, and well, I have a noise, I have alert fatigue, I can't really fix this. And we'll talk about why they can't fix it in just a moment. And that slows the software delivery, which gets back to what they want, what we can't really provide to them. So we're living in that world where this conflict is really difficult to solve. Even if we had the best AppSec tools in the world, it's really hard to solve the human problem. And that's what we're going to talk about. So let's talk about the new development lifecycle today. So the development lifecycle today looks like this. Either I'm a developer and I don't have any AI. Let's say you're one of the 15% that don't use AI. You're writing your own code. You have your IDE, maybe something like a VS Code or Visual Studio, whatever you have. And security have their own requirements, right? So security say, hey, you have 0 new highs and criticals. The developer installs an IDE plugin that came by, provided by the security vendor. And then the developer sees all 5,000 findings for this repo. And the developer can do absolutely nothing about it, because the developer doesn't know what would be a gate later on when the code needs to be deployed. The gate can be SLA that is passed. The gate can be a new code that I just wrote that can be vulnerable. The developers don't know. Not to mention that if we're thinking about the AppSec space, where we are living in a world where we have false positives. Any product can provide, provides false positives. And because of that, even if you are using the IDE, you still have the same challenge of how do you actually go and run through this risk acceptance or risk management process to dismiss a vulnerability. Back at Finastra, actually developers could not dismiss a vulnerability. They had to request something to be approved as a false positive, and one of my teams and the security champions, depends on the business importance of the product, had to say approved or declined. So that's one. Now, the second type of developers, they do have something with agentic workflows on their machines, which means they generate way more code. But who did I have a conversation with on whether AI writes secure code? Raise your hand if you think that AI writes secure code. No, seriously, raise your hand if you think that AI writes secure code. Okay. Let's try the opposite. Raise your hand if you think that AI doesn't write secure code. So all of the rest are neutral. Got it. Okay. So AI is trained on open source, right? And most of the code is not necessarily secure. I'll just put it this way. And then the question is, again, let's say that now we generated 5x more code. How do we actually know what to fix now? We don't know. Let's look at the third option, which is the latest and greatest option. It's just agentic workflows. Today, I can just create a ticket. This is our way to use Copilot. We create an issue on GitHub, and our Copilot picks up the issue and everything up. You'll get the word. Now, we're suffering from very fundamental problems in AppSec. We are not aligned with the development lifecycle today. So let's take a few examples. IDE plugin. Okay. IDE plugin. We looked at different sources, research. We also looked at across our customers. We haven't found. I know that research says that roughly 22% of the developers actually adopt either an IDE plugin or even a CLI within CI/CD pipelines. Well, the problem is that it's an opt-in functionality, and it requires the developer to take an action to install that plugin. MCP has exactly the same problem, right? So everyone talks about MCPs and how awesome it is to run a wrapper that calls an API that scans something. That's what an MCP is. It's exactly the same problem. You need to install it. So you get a low adoption by the developers, despite having the right tools and having the technical solution to get this scanner on the machines. So let's say the developers didn't install the IDE plugin. Raise your hand if you wrote software ever Okay, most. So, so let me just kind of make sure that everyone aligned on how this process actually works. If a developer wants to develop a feature, the developer goes to something like Jira, issue management system. Then the developer clones the repository from the source code management solution, like GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, Azure DevOps. And in the concept of Git, there's something that is called feature branch. Feature branch, it's like in a tree branch. You branch out of the code that you currently have. You write your code, you commit multiple times, and then when you're done, you create something that is called a pull request or a merge request, which is the request to review the code and, with a happy path, deploy it to production. And I've been a customer of more than half of the tools that exist today. Well, the thing is that even the newcomer solutions today, they know how to comment on a pull request. It's a very fundamental feature today. But think about the development lifecycle in which I, in the same case, cloned the repository, started committing code, and now when I open this request to review my code, this is the first time that I get the security findings in that pull request. Well, that's late. It's late not only for the person that wrote the code that needs to go back and fix. That's late because even if you are using an agent and you already tested your software, this is why you created the pull request. And now you need to reprompt to fix it. And reprompting is not predictable. So we spoke about the adoption and we spoke about the feedback. But here's another fun fact. I really like to go into our database and start asking stupid questions. And up to the point that I have a separate read-only instance in production because there's very heavy queries that I'm running there. I have a read-only database instance in production only for me because the developers don't want me to take down the system. And I just have a nice Grafana that takes a few minutes to load every time that I open it. Okay. Now, one of the pieces that we've identified is that, roughly the data size that I looked at was roughly 15 million findings that kind of worth fixing. And while I did this, I found that more than 80% of all of the findings that need to be fixed were authored by developers no longer in the company. So who can fix it? Developers left, right? And one of the biggest problems that I've seen these days is not generating a code fix. This is, if the business of the company or the vendors that you are using is not generating models, then everyone has very similar advantage. It's just, prompt, this is the model, generate the code fix. And 2 years ago, GPT-3 did generate pretty awesome code fixes. The thing is that even if you look at Dependabot or you look at different bots that generate code fixes, because we as security, we want to generate the code fix, we will make the developer's job easy. No, you're not going to make the developer's job easy because what you need to do is to find a developer that can approve those changes. And that's what's missing. That ownership.
Taking the vibe out of vibe coding.
It's a vibe reviewing, right? Vibe reviewing. But at the end of the day, the person that will approve those changes generated by an AI piece of code are the people that really have the expertise in the product, that understand if something will break by those changes, not the person that knows how to read code, not the regular developer that doesn't know if that specific area in the product will break. So I don't know, 10 minutes ranting about how things are broken. Let's talk a little bit about how to fix them. Okay. Okay, so maybe let's start with one thing. So first of all, developers, at least to my opinion, are the most difficult audience to work with in any company. They are special. They have their own opinions, and the thing is that developers don't really appreciate when security comes with a stick and says, here's a list of the findings that you need to fix, or here's a fix for you, or in any possible way, just share anything that is not privately to them, and first give them the opportunity to fix anything. This is why IDE plugins are, private, but low adoption, right? So, so the way to think about it is, if you had the capability to actually scan every single code change across the enterprise, you have 100% visibility, but have this ability to even at that feature branch when code is being committed, if you were able to scan every single code change and identify if there's a vulnerability there, according to the policy, again, it can be 0 new, highs and critical, just let's go with that. Then you can notify the developer over, we call it, in Arnica, we call it chat-ops. Here, it's mentioned as an instant messaging, but in essence, the reason to scan something and actually communicate it to the developer over, let's say, Slack or Teams is because, one, everyone in the company has it. There's no opt-in anymore. Everyone has Teams, everyone has Slack. That's not a problem. You can communicate with the developer privately. You don't need to communicate it to a channel. And the private communication can be, to an author of the code, can be to the committer of the code. For those that are not familiar, the differences between who committed the code versus who instructed the authorship of the code. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because with the AI agents, there's a mix. One of them is the author, which is, let's say, me, the developer, and one of them is going to be the committer, which is the agent. So let's say that you scan the code, you found that right person to communicate with. Then you also need to define that trigger that you want to be able to notify that developer on. And that trigger can be, again, new changes. It's in the technical terms, it's called the a Git push event. It can be based on maybe a severity that is changed. For example, let's say that when I deployed my code 2 days ago, I had a high severity vulnerability, but it didn't have a fix. But now it does have a fix. So I want to notify the developer that there is a fix, and the developer can upgrade the package where he or she recently touched the code. And the reason why I mentioned recently is because developers have an attention span of a fish. That's the reality. So if it's not in the context, it's not going to happen. As a matter of fact, if you, in that state of mind that you need to open tickets on everything in security, well, if you open a ticket, you're too late. That's pretty much the reality. Because you need to go back to product, you need to prioritize. It doesn't work like that. And eventually when you get to that, maybe on the condition side, think about it this way. It can be, I don't want to boil the ocean. I want to start with maybe the repos that I care more about in the company, or I care about very specific risk threshold, or maybe EPSS with exploitability prediction. Whatever the condition that you have, think about that condition, and that's what you apply. But then question is, what is the action that you should take? And this is why we call it, in Arnica, we call it chat-ops. When I notify the developer about the vulnerability, it needs to be actionable for the developer. Some of those notifications, they shouldn't ask the developer, what do you want to do? They should just fix the problem. And I'll be very specific about that. So how many of you are familiar with the problem of hard-coded secrets in the code?
Hard-coded what?
Hard-coded secrets in the code. API keys, anything like that, right? The problem with hard-coded secrets is that the secret is in the Git history, not the fact that it's visible in the repo. So if a developer pushed a hard-coded secret, what you want to do is immediately remove that commit from the repo. You don't want the developer to ask what to do about it. On the flip side, if you have other vulnerabilities that are still being in development, such as a package that might have vulnerabilities or static code analysis vulnerability, in this case, you just want to provide maybe a recommendation to the developer. You can say upgrade the package, or you can provide an AI code recommendation to make the developer's life easier. But at the end of the day, it's not timely because it's not a real risk yet. And that's kind of how we're thinking about it. This is kind of semi-pitch, semi-not, but this is what we truly believe in. If I didn't have Arnica, I would likely build it by myself in the, as a practitioner. And just by doing so, you can actually communicate with the developer, fix the real problems as left as possible. And remember, we spoke about the late feedback. That happens before the pull request. Now, we also know that there are false positives. We mentioned this. So how do we actually go through a risk management process with development that don't really want to adhere to risk management processes? So the thought process is this. Let's say that you got, and this, by the way, these are screenshots that I didn't take from Arnica. I took from Slack, Arnica's integration with Slack. So the thought process is this. The developer received a notification. This case is just an SCA vulnerability. In SCA, as opposed to secrets, you can't see it from there, but don't worry. You can get multiple options to fix. Let's say that the developer said, you know what? I don't care. That's the term, right? I don't care. So the developer can then say, you know what? I want to dismiss this vulnerability from whatever reason. It can be false positive. It can be maybe I don't have a capacity for that. Maybe the risk is tolerable in that context. I don't know. And in this case, it just pops up another message, that requires a justification. Now, let's say that you did this. Who reviews this, right? So I can tell you again, now that I have a good, big enough data set with this functionality, I can share that the more common policy that we've seen is that high and critical go to the security team to review. And then there is a split between the companies on medium severity findings. And a medium severity finding can go either the kind of let the developers say, you know what, if it's false positive, just keep it a false positive. And the other way is for those that are a bit more regulated, the medium severity actually goes to a security champion to review and then approve or dismiss. So let's say we've got this message. And by the way, most of the time I spent on the slides is moving this mouse from here to here. That's the thing. Crazy. Live demo, right? Okay. So in this case, the security team can receive this. This time it's in a channel. It's not a private message. And it can get all of the details with this vulnerability and who authored it and why it needs to be dismissed. And if you think about kind of completing the entire workflow, it's going to be by the way of whatever the decision that you have made, just let the developer know. And this is exactly, what you need to do. You just need to communicate it back to the developer, and the developer will say, yay or nay. Now, that actually solves both the adoption problem, because as I mentioned, it's way earlier. And also, it's not late in the feedback, because maybe for those that work with the AppSec teams or in the AppSec teams, raise your hand if your AppSec team has an SLA to respond to messages from developers. Yeah. That was the story of my life in Finastra. Your security team is not fast enough. Something along the lines of you don't have, follow the sun policy to respond. And essentially, if you request the security team to review something, the security team needs to have the capability, or must be capable of reviewing those changes that block developers from deploying code. With this approach, this time just got longer because you can push multiple times and you can resolve the vast majority of the vulnerabilities before you even get to the pull request. So maybe one more thing to mention. The title of the talk is, all around the carrot and the stick, right? And what I didn't mention is that at Arnica, every company has its own expertise. Our expertise are Git. We do low-level Git stuff. That's our business. And we as security practitioners, we typically give that stick to the developers. Here's a vulnerability, go to fix it. You did something wrong, go fix it. Every time it's go fix it. But how many products that actually provide? That was the champagne. Yeah. How many how many products that actually provide that carrot to the developers and say, hey, well done for fixing stuff? And this is why we developed a feature. I'll make this, Jimmy, stop dancing. This is a screenshot from our GitHub. The way to get more adoption by developers is celebrate those fixes. Celebrate whatever they do that is good. And developers will do, it's maybe a little bit underestimated, but developers will do a lot for GIFs. Seriously. And if you can recognize that, you can actually get a real impact. Now, fun anecdote. We released this feature. In Arnica, if you look it up on our website, you will see we call it the woot woot feature. Like, this is the official name of the feature. And we released it as a joke. They said, hey, we know where's the fix, so why won't we just start posting GIFs and start flooding the pull requests? So we released it, and the first 2 weeks we deployed it. It's kind of feature flagged. We deployed it to different customers, and we released it to a few customers. And the feedback that we've got after 2 weeks is, hey, our development teams now have Slack and Teams channels ranting about why they got this GIF and not the other GIF. And this is why you want a feature or any functionality in your products that can actually tell, hey, well done for the job. Now we'll tag you. Not only that, we'll let you know that you did a very good job. Since this happens in a pull request, we'll also tag the developer and say, this is the developer that actually should be recognized. Now, I know that there is how many of you heard about the Goodhart's Law? Okay, so Goodhart's Law means that if you start measuring something, it misses the purpose, right? I don't know if I have time to tell the story. How much time do I have?
You have enough time.
Yeah, okay. So, anyone read Freakonomics by any chance? Freakonomics. Yeah, it's a book. It's a series of 3 books. So there was a story in India. There's quite a lot of cobra snakes at some point, and the government had an incentive. They said, hey, if you can bring me cobra heads, we'll pay you. And initially they started getting some cobra heads, of course, but at some point they got so many of them because people started having farms for those cobra heads, for those cobras. And that's essentially the opposite effect. So you don't, of course, you want to recognize developers. And if you think about how to measure a good developer, the wrong way to measure a good developer is a developer that introduces and fixes all the time the same thing, right? That's the wrong way to do that. So therefore, kind of think about the scoring mechanism and how many you introduce versus how many you fixed, and kind of correlate it in a way. Now, so maybe, one of those things that, we should talk about, and this is kind of gets me closer to the end of my session. At the end of the day, we need to measure not only what the developers are doing, we call it the Git blame versus the Git fame. Git blame is essentially, it's a command on Git that tells who wrote a specific line of code. We really kind of want to, to have this fame and find those people that have those fixes. And there are multiple things to think about when you are trying to recognize those developers and even identify those developers towards kind of next workflows that you will want to involve them in. And this is why I said I took one screenshot from Arnika's product, and it doesn't have the logo on it. The way to think about it is, at least in our side, the entire base of the product is based on the identities that we see in the system. Won't get into the details why, but just FYI, Git and corporate identities are completely disconnected. So we had to build something to find a way to communicate with the developers. And the thought process is this. Let's say that you have now, in the development lifecycle today, you have a tool that generates AI code fixes. Great. How do you recognize those people that can review those changes? The way to do this is to look at those people that we know that, one, have some sentiment to security, right? Someone that we know that fixes vulnerabilities, maybe even reviews vulnerabilities. Someone that marks, your findings as false positives. Is also someone that knows the product. But at the same time, look at the historical behavior of those developers. Again, I'll share how we do this, but you can build it by yourself. The way that we do this is that we're building in that behavioral graph behind each identity, and we look at the historical commits and pull requests and audit trail, and based on all of this behavior, we can tell who is best equipped to review any security changes. And if you think about this approach, this is pretty much boils down to building up a security champions program. In a security champion, so maybe one more story about Finastra. So when I joined the Finastra, it's roughly 10,000 employees, not like good size of company, not huge. And we had roughly 100 security champions when I just joined. And a big portion of them were managers and people that I didn't see a reason why they should be security champions. So back then, the only solution that my team had is to go to each one of those champions and interview them and ask, what are your contributions? We swapped 80 of them. And that's kind of tells you the story of how can you know that a security champion is a security champion? Well, by the activity of that champion. If that champion either fixes vulnerabilities or reviews vulnerabilities, you can tell the champion does the job. And that can also contribute back to reshaping and repurposing kind of that champion for that product. By the way, it doesn't need to be one. It can be 5 champions for a product, whatever that is rolling. But then developers end up leaving the companies, and then the question is, who's the next best person to fix the vulnerability? So it's never-ending story. Right? You will always have developers leaving. You will always have developers more active and less active, and it's a recurring process that you need to think about how can you actually, let's say one developer left the company, how do you find the next best developer to review those security changes? Because you need to drive the security program. maybe the last thing to think about is incorporate everything, early feedback, later feedback as well, and also kind of those security champions or solve the ownership problem into the existing workflows that you have. So if you think about the workflow, I'll tell you again what is common that I've seen today. More than 90% of the tenants have at least that policy. The policy is this: notify the developer in the feature branch on push when a new medium or high, depends on the type of customer, type of that vulnerability appears in the branch. When that happens, communicate privately with the developer. Don't let anyone else know except security that they know, but they don't need to be notified. If the developer didn't fix the vulnerability or did not resolve the vulnerability, it can be a false positive, of course. At that point in the pull request, annotate the comment, right? That's easy. Just go to the pull request. This is what many other tools do. That's easy. And start with a zero new, let's say zero new, highs and criticals as a gate. When that happens, also tag the security champions, and you'll be surprised on what he does. Because I'll share with you some numbers. And this is, again, because I like to run the queries. 78% of the cases where we notify the developers on push, they never get to the PR. So if you think about, remember we looked at that chart where the development velocity goes up and the security velocity is not going up? Well, the thing is that just by doing this on every single code push and communicating with the developer, you don't need to be involved as a security team. So in our case, 78%, let's say 80, you have pretty much 5x your productivity by not even seeing those risks that developers address. No AI, just the workflow. But then what I also like to analyze is what is the impact of those comments in the pull request. And we started analyzing the data, especially after we added the champions in that process. And the moment that we started adding the champions into the process, we noticed that 8% of all risks that do appear in pull requests never get to production. Now, at Finastra, you know what? I'll be embarrassed because it's public. I'll be embarrassed to give you the number, but it's high double-digit number and how many vulnerabilities were merged. I do want to maybe give you one more piece of data on top of that. 92%. This is a point in time. I do this quarterly. 92% never merged to production means that there's plenty of pull requests that are still being reviewed. So with the remainder of those 8%, 7% are in review. Only 1% was merged into production. I just wanted to be fair with the number. So
what you're saying, it's worse than 92%.
It's way better than a 92%, meaning only 1% is actually merged to production.
Isn't that not very productive?
Huh?
Isn't that not very productive?
Is it not very productive? Actually, it's very productive. It's very productive because most of the risks, 99% of the risks, never deploy to production. Yeah. So the 8%, again, just to clarify, within the 8%, it includes both open pull requests as well as merged code into production, because this is the point in time of did we notify on a pull request. Only 1% out of those 8 is actually merged into production. So meaning
92% of the work being done is never actually. So those features were not 99% dropped. They were
it's not that the features were dropped. It's just the vulnerabilities were fixed. Yes. But you know what? Who saw Silicon Valley? Do you know what I'm going to talk about? There was a scene where the entire code base was deleted, and there was an AI agent that deleted that too. That too. Yeah, Replit also. Yeah, but we're talking. Yeah, we're talking about classics. The classics are the AI deleted all of our code because it found the best way to remove all of our bugs. Right? So that's not the way here. Obviously, this is actual reduction of the vulnerabilities. Yeah. And with that, I think I can open it up for questions.
I know this sounds a little
Maybe.
but if the security team are the people that are reviewing the code and determining what the vulnerabilities are and how to fix them, why isn't the security team actually writing the code?
So the question is, if security team determine the vulnerabilities, why don't they write the code? Do they have the expertise? So there are a few companies. So I do want to highlight, in some companies, the security teams actually do write some code. The security teams can write either shared libraries, or in companies like Meta. I know that security engineers actually do contribute to the product, but it's a very uncommon use case.
We're checking it to make sure that it's working.
Yep, correct. Any additional questions? If you have a question, someone else has the question.
Can you tell us briefly what Arnica does that others don't?
Oh, I forgot the sales pitch. Yeah.
That's your cue.
Yes. So what we do in Arnica, we call it pipeline-less application security. Pipeline-less sounds like agentless and serverless. But essentially what we build is those, of course, we have scanners, but in essence, what we build is developer native workflows that make that impact on the developer, that solve that human problem. Now, in my thought process, because of being a customer of most of the incumbents and some of the newcomers that I kind of managed to POC, otherwise we wouldn't have Arnica. I noticed that finding those vulnerabilities is my problem, but it's not a problem that I solve for developers. And therefore, what we've built is, if you need to classify it in a bucket, you call it ASPM. But in essence, what we do run the scanners. We connect the repos. We scan all of the repos, even if there's new repos popping up overnight. We scan all of this. And we provide the prioritization and function level reachability and all of the buzzwords that you probably heard about the different scanners. But essentially, this is our freemium. We don't charge for any of the scanners. We don't charge for full visibility, for risks, for seeing anything, because the value is not there. Even SSO is free. Like, seriously. The important things that we ended up kind of charging for is, think about it this way: if the developers get more productive in their workflow, get less friction, and the security team gets more productive, you save money for the company. Then we're happy to take some of that money. That's the way that we think about it, and this is the way that we run our business. And that's in high level, and you saw the numbers. You saw pretty much what the product does. That's really what we are. We really build the product for developers, and we just happen to be a security company. Yes.
Yeah. So it sounds like.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you. It sounds like a lot of this is kind of dependent. It's not. Okay, whatever.
It's on now.
It sounds like a lot of this is based off of the actual detection of those issues in the first place. I'm curious about the mechanism behind that? Is it a heuristics-based kind of thing? Is there, I mean, I would think that this kind of leans into the area of AI anyways, to kind of do the actual detection so that we don't have people going and manually reviewing all that, right?
It's a mix. Okay, so the vast majority is very much deterministic, and it's all rules. We have certain capabilities associated with AI, such as fixes and revalidation. Of course, it exists, but it boils down back to the same thing. We sell the workflows, and everything around that, including AI, by the way. When we add AI, it doesn't make our kind of beer taste better, right? And therefore, the way that we designed our AI capabilities are just by connecting to your AI. And then you can prompt pretty much whatever you want. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it sounds like, to me, it just kind of sounds like the whole process is like rinsing your dishes off and putting them in the dishwasher instead of just leaving them in the sink. Pretty much. Is that kind of accurate?
It's a good way to think about it, yeah. Essentially, think about it this way. It's not providing the remediation. That part is easy. Is making sure that those dishes are actually being washed. Okay. Today, it's in security, but the more code is being pushed by developers, the more governance you'll need. You start with security, you go through privacy. We already have customers that have their privacy engineering and legal teams involved as part of exactly the same process. The lawyers don't understand Git, but they understand a license violation. The privacy teams don't understand Git, but they understand the product name and what type of fields are being added. That's pretty much how it works. All right. Any additional questions? Yes.
Maybe about anything, right? So I'll just ask real quick. I did see, I did look it up and I saw that Arnica was a type of a genus. It was a type of a leaf or a plant. I'm just wondering how you picked the name. What the definition was.
So yeah, so Arnica is a herb. You know what aloe vera is, right? Yeah.
Like natural medicine, so it actually can relieve inflammation. You use it like if you're working out, and like a lot of massage therapists will use it. It actually kind of like relaxes the muscle.
Is that available on your store?
So that's the name of the company. The name of the company is pretty much what we do. We heal the pain. And where did it come from? My wife, she's hugging trees, very grounded. And I was looking for a name that doesn't have the word cyber or security or another animal. So not a wolf or something, and then ginger was taken, so we took Arnica. Turmeric. And by the way, fun fact: in our testing environment, all of our repos are herbs. And the opposite of Arnica is like aloe vera doesn't heal the pain; it just smooths everything. Which is why our dev environment is under the name not aloe vera. Okay, not aloe vera. Yes. Very geeky. Yes, I know. Any more questions? Yes.
Is looking to hire someone who knows cybersecurity and front-end development?
Yes.
So you are looking for hires.
We're looking for hires. Yep. Any more questions? Yes.
Is Arnica's primary focus on static code analysis?
Question is whether whether our primary focus is on static code analysis. Mainly, yes, on the repos, meaning we're not running any dynamic scanning, but we have ways to determine, for example, the way that we do reachability is that we're statically scanning for the specific call to that vulnerable function. So there is some correlation, but it's not, for example, if you have any dynamic loading of packages or anything like that, that will require a bit more work to get that correlation. It's possible, but a bit more work. Yeah.
I might have missed it earlier, but the database that you're running your queries on, that you're getting these statistics on, can you talk about that? Like how big is it? Is it basically all of your customers?
All of our, yeah, so the databases, the database specifically, the one that I'm querying, sorry, one of the databases that I'm querying, where I get all of the juicy stuff, is a database of roughly 340 gigs, 350 gigs. And then we have multiple tables that, you know, the join is a problem, not the query itself. And in terms of databases, we have some relational databases where, you know, this is where more of the findings go. We have, you know, NoSQL databases where we care more about performance and the read speed, as well as we just removed our graph database literally in the last prod push because we found a way to normalize our graph in such a way that our code can handle it way faster. So that's pretty much kind of how we run things.
There's one of the screenshots.
Yep.
In one of those screenshots you posted, there was a Slack message. It was referred specifically to like a Babel vulnerability, so dependency vulnerability. In those cases, and this is more taking the perspective of the blameless culture, what happens in the event where boosts the merge of the PR? How do you like go back to the developer in like a private way or something and say, hey, the package that the microservice, let's say that suggesting this vulnerability, how do you tackle that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. An excellent question is it means that I don't have an answer. Good question means that I do have an answer. So in the way that it works is that you can set up different policies in Arnica, and you can say, like, we're really proud of that, you know, policy engine that we have. It's complex and powerful at the same time. And the way that it works is that you can set up either campaigns or SLA-based or change-based policies. So in that case that you just mentioned, let's say that the vulnerability didn't exist, or maybe existed and didn't have a fix. The next time that we run the schedule scan, which typically happens daily, or real time, again, depends if you touch the file at any point, we will notify back the author of the code. That's how it works. Now, again, you can do it based on the author, you can do it based on the champions, whatever that works and you want to configure. What we've seen, kind of more frequent use cases is issues that were dismissed. So for example, fairly new policy that we just released is a policy that says, let's say that there was an SCA vulnerability that was a medium severity vulnerability, right? And overnight, there was a new CV that popped up on the same package, and now it became high, right? But the issue is already dismissed. And that's an issue that I had with all of the SCA tools that I used in the past. They never reopened. So now we have a workflow that actually looks for, hey, how many did you have an increase of CVEs on that package? And did that increase also the risk? And if so, get it back to the dev. So all of this stuff is automated. You just need to define the policy that you want, and then it runs that workflow for you. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was curious what the buyback is, where, like you mentioned, developers are a tough customer.
Yeah.
It could be like, hey, they finally got their feature out the door after back and forth security, and then all of a sudden the next day they get a knock on the door saying, hey, this dependency you're using has a vulnerability. Yeah,
well, that's a real problem. You know, the fact that a CV popped up overnight and then suddenly became a blocker for the PR. It happens. And then the decision is, if you have a hard gate, then you can't bypass, or you just go and dismiss it, and then repopulate it later. You don't need to talk to. That's the thing. Think about the workflow as something that is completely disconnected from emotions, okay, or completely disconnected from the hierarchy. You have developers. Developers can help other developers, and that's how you make that impact. It sounds like I have very low EQ because I disconnected from emotions, but and maybe I do. Yeah.
How do you deal with this problem that your service is looking to your customer's code, right? Probably pass it to like third party. So how do you deal with like if your customer doesn't want anyone sees the code, or like this is their asset. There are many things inside their codes that they don't want to view or review the code. And how do you deal with
Yeah, yeah, it's a good question. We have a few solutions for that. First of all, we can give you a Helm chart, and you can deploy it on Kubernetes on your site. That's one. The other option, or that's actually part of our SOC 2 attestation. All of our infrastructure is ephemeral, and we never store your repos. We never store your code. So we connect to your LLMs. We integrate into your LLMs. So you don't need to integrate. Like in POCs, we integrate into ours because sometimes customers just, prospects just want to test things out, and that makes things easier. But in production, every time we connect to the customers, with customer keys. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Any additional questions? All right. Thank you so much.